Welcome to the Bravo Star of the Show Masterclass here at the Fabled Academy. Today we are taking a look at the Starvo basics with Florin Christian Loghin. He got second place at the Pro Tour New Jersey with Starvo. Florin, welcome to the Academy.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to talk again about Starvo. I pretty much remember like it was yesterday that we just talked about it.
Yeah, definitely. Time has definitely flown by.
Yeah, and a lot of things have changed, and now players have again the chance to play their favorite hero, Starvo.
For some, yes. For some, I guess less. But yes, I think it's definitely going to be an interesting format that's coming up. Yeah, let's see what it brings.
Yeah, the Living Legend format. It's the first time that we get to play this format at the World Championship in Barcelona this year. What is your opinion that we have this format now?
I think it's great. I think also there's like enough time has passed so that it's different to the current Classic Constructed. So I also think it's going to be wildly different, both from pace and playstyle. And it gives people the chance to experience, let's say, the older heroes, which maybe a lot of players are starting new. They don't know what Starvo is, they don't know what Chain is. Some might know now because of Monarch Draft, but they didn't experience the full joy, let's say, of playing Classic Constructed Chain. So yeah, I think it's good. And it also gives people something new to work on and test and fiddle around with.
If you don't make it to the top 8 at the World Championship, will you play in the Living Legend format Battle Hardened yourself?
Probably. No promises though.
Yeah. Alright, to all the viewers who don't know what the Living Legend format is, we covered that already on the channel in a basics video. Check that out, but now let's dive into the Starvo basics. Florin, for the beginning, tell the viewers what is your experience playing Starvo?
Yeah, so basically when Starvo initially was spoiled in Everfest, we thought it was a prank. We didn't think the card was real. It's a unique hero with the 3 elements that you can play basically from Tales of Aria. And in addition to being a guardian, the abilities, for those who don't know, say at the beginning of your turn, you may reveal 1 earth, 1 ice, 1 lightning card, and then your first attack that costs 3 or more gets +2, dominate, and go again. Of course, you can imagine that doing this on strong guardian attacks can become very powerful, especially if you follow it up with the winters, which you're allowed to play because you're an ice hero. So when we saw this, we immediately started working on it. I think everyone in the team played Starvo, also at the Pro Tour, but also before in the Pro Quests. And yeah, basically we played Starvo as long as it was allowed to play.
So the Pro Tour was one of the major events for Starvo, but Starvo really changed throughout history. Can you give us a little bit more context on where Starvo was back then at the Pro Tour?
Yeah, so Starvo actually came off of a few nerfs, let's say. Awakening was banned and Autumn's Touch was suspended, if I remember correctly. Now, this might not sound like Autumn's Touch is a very, let's say, invisible card maybe to some. So it's 3 cost, attacks for 7 in red, 6 in yellow, and 5 in blue. But it blocks for 3, and it's an earth type. Of course, because you always have to keep showing each turn, you need to play good colored cards, let's say. Good earth cards, good ice cards, good lightning cards. And this was one strong card that was basically missing. In addition, you had Awakening, which was removed. Awakening costs 2 as an instant. You can show an earth card, and then you create surge tokens based on the life difference. If you use an earth card, then you get twice as many. And you get to search your deck for, I believe it's Guardian card, if I don't get it wrong now, with cost equal to the number of surges you have. Long speech, but effectively what it allowed you to do is it allowed you to dip in life, end of turn of the opponent, crown maybe to find the last missing piece that you're missing for the 3 colors, and get yourself a nice pulverize, which you can then dominate for free, which of course is completely game swinging. Yeah, basically playing these cards for free is just, I think, the strongest turnaround spell, other than maybe Kano one-shotting you off the top. Yeah. So yeah, these things were missing at the Pro Tour, and it still did so well. This is something that was basically what the Pro Tour was played at. This also evened the field a little bit more. But the Pro Tour, you were playing against Prism and against Chain mostly. Prism essentially killed you with auras. For those who don't know, Luminaris allows your auras to attack with Go again, if you have a yellow in your pitch zone. So what it does effectively, because Starvo cannot clear auras efficiently, and Prism can play up to 2 auras a turn, it allows you to build pressure on board and then pressure Starvo's life total while surviving until you effectively kill them off. So this was considered by some a good matchup for Prism. By some Starvo players, they weren't too bothered with it. It was close enough, let's say, that it warranted players to play Prism. And you had Chain, the big value hero. So some of you, more, I'm assuming a lot of you will know it from Monarch Draft, but effectively it allows you to increase a counter in form of Soul Shackles, which allows you to banish from the top. And then what this did against Starvo is effectively it allowed you to go into the late game where you could play with a significantly larger hand size. Especially in CC, you have more time and more cards in deck. So this could kind of keep up with Starvo. There were also some innovations with Tomo Fiendal. I don't want to go into too much specifics, but that allowed Chain to keep up. You can watch the finals and see how Pablo used it to a good effect. So that was the meta that was basically being played. After Pro Tour 1, more players started playing Starvo, and the Starvo mirror evolved a little bit. At the beginning, some players were already doing this at Pro Tour 1, where they were, I think Michael Hamilton had a more defensive Starvo list where he won the calling. I think it was in the same time period, where it was more of a defensive, don't take that much damage, and then when the opportunity presents itself, then you can do your, let's say, show and tell with the 3 colors. But the deck wasn't built fully to do just that, and it could play these mid-range games. But the list which most Starvo players played was, some refer to it Casino, a Starvo, even though the mats was not that much Casino as people make it out to seem. But yeah, that was basically Starvo. So
okay, so can you sum up in 1 or 2 sentences what you like about playing Starvo so much?
Of course, doing powerful things is always fun in every card game, I think. If you will disagree with that. But it also had quite a few intricacies. So you're always debating each turn, like, okay, of course, if you each hand you just draw up Ice, Earth, Lightning, and you just keep slamming Crippling Crush. And the Crippling Crush, I can see how that doesn't seem to be difficult for people, which it isn't, of course. But there are some intricacies when you don't have those hands. And how do I bridge the turns until I get those hands? How do I fish for things? What is the best way for me to play when I'm not doing these powerful things? Because inherently the cards are quite weak in Starvo, right? I think that you're playing lightning cards which you wouldn't even play in a draft deck, some of them, but you're playing them because they're blue and they're lightning. Yeah, so I think that's kind of what I enjoyed about it. Also, the mirrors were relatively intricate, especially with Awakening. There was this whole kind of game of cat and mouse of like, if you go all out at the beginning and you hit the opponent low and then he starts doing his powerful things starting with an Awakening, then you're the one who falls behind. It can be that it's not good enough. When do I use my equipment? That's also something critical in the mirror. So our testing team played Tectonic, the Ice Shield, and the shoes and the gloves because that was enough to cover a powerful turn for the opponent, so you get tempo back. There are these small intricacies that, of course, if one player runs hot and the other doesn't, then it doesn't really matter. But I guess that happens in most mirrors and most card games, yeah. Whichever way that looks, whatever variance that looks like, yeah. But yeah, that's kind of what I liked it. Also because it plays differently than what we're kind of doing right now in Classic Constructed. So it wasn't so much a value gameplay. I mean, everything is a value gameplay in every card game, of course. But it wasn't this, I like to call it this Bullander playstyle of like, attack for 7, block for 6, or like try to, just go a little bit over 12 each turn and then go over the whole game like that. And then at the end, one player wins. Or some fatigue playstyle where all I'm doing is trying to clean your damage or take as little as possible and then whittle you down with a weapon. That's what I like about it, and that's what I miss about the format. To maybe take a little detour into the ALL, I think this is also what some players will enjoy about this, that it's going to be a different experience than Classic Constructed.
Before we dive deeper into how Starvo will look in the Living Legend meta, tell us a little bit more about the playstyles that are available with Starvo.
Yeah, like I touched a bit on it already. So the first is the so-called where you are trying effectively each turn to fuse. I call it, it's not technically fusing, but to show the 3 elements and then have a powerful attack. It displays elemental red attacks, evergreens, autumn touch, etc. And that is your goal. So every turn fuse, and then with the ice card, attack with the icy hammer to cause a little bit of disruption, but also just for damage. Arsenal a card, and then in the next turn, opponent's turn, you will crown aggressively to find the card that you're missing. Finding means basically just have a redraw, because you're not manipulating your deck in any way. And then in the down turns, you want to minimize what your opponent is doing to you so that you can find another powerful turn. That was one Starvo playstyle. The other was more of this defensive Starvo. Some people played it at the Pro Tour. I think Tobias Lindt played it at the Pro Tour, Swedish player, quite well known for playing Guardians. I think a few other players played it as well. That relies more on this defensive game plan and just valuing the opponent out. Essentially what Ultim became later. Kind of not the full fatigue Ultim, but this more of a reduce the damage I'm taking, attack you with hammer, reduce the damage I'm taking, you with hammer, and then when I can Starvo, then I Starvo. But I'm playing much less color cards, as I like to call them. So the chance of it happening is lower. But yeah, that's kind of the, let's say, the 2 playstyles. I think there maybe would be other playstyles that people could try and figure out, like fatigue Starvos. De facto, you can play a fatigue Starvo if you want to, but why would you? Is kind of the question always. Because you are an elemental guardian, so you can play Crown of Seeds, you can play Rampart, and you can do what Ultim did, yeah, and people still have nightmares about. But I don't think we will be seeing this in LL format. I don't think we will be seeing fatigue decks in Living Legends format. Maybe, yeah. Okay. Not so hot take, I think. I think a lot of people would agree with that.
So we already touched about his position back at the Pro Tour and afterwards before he went to Living Legend. But let's touch a little bit more on that. Let's talk about the matchups that were back then at the Pro Tour era in New Jersey and what that meant for Starvo.
I'll start with the good matchups. So when I sit down with Starvo, what do I want to see? So basically anything that was Katsu, Dori, essentially a lot of these classical heroes, Reiner. Maybe Dori now, not so much with the new Glistening Steelblade, I think it's called, the new one that they got in the battle decks. This wasn't out back then, yeah. But effectively these like value kind of decks. Or maybe Briar. Briar was also a good matchup because you could stop them from doing their powerful things while they couldn't really stop you from doing your powerful things. So yeah, that's kind of why Starvo was, let's say, so dominant. Because the maths of you dominating a Crippling Crush was just so much higher than what any deck could do, considering they were losing 2 cards. And there was then the Frosthammer coming by for a 4, which most decks couldn't really handle in a clean way. So yeah, that was what you wanted to see. What you didn't want to see is a strong word, but Prism. If possible, you didn't want to play into Prism. The matchup wasn't fantastic because of what I meant. So this aura plan, which they would play out, and then pressure you with the auras, and then you have to decide what you are doing, whether you're clearing auras or attacking them. They could have these very strong starts where they turn one play out 2 auras, and then you're so far behind because you can only clear an aura a turn, and they are surely dropping another one afterwards. So they attack you with an aura or whatever, and then drop another aura. It just keeps going and going until the next turn where they can drop 2 auras. And they had very good defensive capabilities into you. That said, it was like, I don't want people to get the impression that it was like Ultimate to Prism. It was not this. So Starvo had enough power to just straight up kill Prism. By chaining a few good turns together, you would kill Prism. So one thing that I remember, one game I played at a Pro Quest against Fam, he top 80 worlds, and I kept Pulse in hand. And I wouldn't arsenal it, and I would just keep fusing with every earth attack I got. So it was the Lightning Ice Pulse, and I just had it in hand, and basically I just needed to draw a red attack. So each turn I'm coming for 9 dominate with Go again. And I just kept doing that. Yeah. So you have the power to do these things. That's why I don't think there was like horrible matchups. Actually, what a horrible, very difficult matchup was Ice Lexi, even though this sounds a bit weird, because of the disruption. So they were playing Icy, Chilling Ice Fang, the arrow that lets you discard unless you pay 1, I think it was. And this made it a little difficult for you to keep your attacks, because they would hit you twice. So then you would have to like take damage and then you're discarding, but then you can't, let's say you have a red attack and then the 3 colors. So which card are you discarding? You can't block because all your stuff blocks for 2, or half the stuff blocks for 2. So you're like, okay, I'm discarding a card, I'm pitching a card, right? So if I pitch the red attack and then he hits me with another attack, then I can't do anything. But if I don't pitch the red attack and I pitch one of the color cards, then I can't fuse. And then this is kind of the dynamic of the game, which made it a bit more complicated. And I think there were Lexi players that did decently well at the Pro Tour 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Chain, which was, I think that was the closest matchup. I think this was 50-50. Maybe at that time, Chain was ahead of Starvo. If you played 200 games, maybe there was a little edge for Chain. But yeah, I don't particularly think at that time Starvo had too many bad matchups, which I think was also shown. I know at the calling it was won by Starvo. I think it was Sas from Poland, but I might be wrong, that won it. Or maybe it was, I don't remember who it was. It was one of the Polish superstars.
That's true, yes. So before we talk about the matchups that we can see at the World Championship this year when playing the Living Legend Battle Hardened, let's show your deck list back from Pro Tour for a moment and talk about a few cards that you choose to put in there, but that don't make it now to the Living Legend format.
Yeah, one of the items. So we'll start with the equipment. So the first thing is time skippers. I think this will not be played because Prism's going to have a hard time, considering there's going to be 5 in the format. At least at the beginning there's going to be 5 for sure. There's also going to be Chain with a little bit higher power level, which Prism's going to have to deal with. The Rampart is something that will maybe go, maybe stay, depending on how the matchups play out. We need to see. But I think you're going to be playing Stalagmite most of the time because of the frostbite that you give on block. The Rampart is nice in Starvo because you almost always crown to find what you're looking for. So for the element that you're missing, or to give you the chance to draw it. So it's nice. And most of the stuff that you're pitching blocks for 2, right? So you just crown for 1 and then shield for 1. And then it's like you're blocked with a card. So you're not really losing much. So that's why initially people are playing the Rampart. But let's see. I think Stalagmite is probably going to be the go-to line. Then moving forward, one card that's missing is Shock Charmers, which I didn't play back then, but that's because I think most people didn't have Kano on their radar, let's say, which probably made it easier for the Kano players. Probably you can find space for Shock Charmers, depending on what comes up. So if Icelander becomes a deck, if Kano is a deck somehow, then that's something that can be looked at. Then looking at the attacks, the yellow break round, we're not going to be playing the yellow evergreens. These were concessions to not being allowed to play the Autumn's Touches, yeah? Mm-hmm. So this was just the next best thing they could play, and you can see they block for 2. The effect is almost never relevant. You're not getting fatigued on this deck. At least, people are going to prove me wrong, yeah? But I don't see how with all this extra damage that you're getting, and your just generally strong attacks, right? The Crippling Crush comes for 11, you need to block 11 damage, etc. So that's not going to make it. Instead of the yellow evergreens, there's going to be yellow Autumn's Touches, and then together with some other cards, you're going to be playing the new attack, the new Starstruck. Then if we go further down, the Eye of Ophidia was, I think Team Dragon Shield also play this, other than us, so our testing team. This was basically just a nod to I want to Starvo as often and as consistently as possible. That's why the card is in the deck. So I want to opt 2, I want to find the missing element. Opting on the crown basically can give you up to 3 cards to look at. when you're digging. So that's why it's there. Yeah. Other than that, we're gonna cut, I think it's the icy encounters. We're gonna get better disruption pieces for those. Those were, again, a lot of the cards where you are, if you're looking at this deck list and you're thinking, what is this card doing here? Usually the hint is at the bottom, where it says ice, or earth, or lightning. And then at the top, the little blue strip. That's what a lot of these cards are doing in this deck. But I think this is what gives you the impression of the deck. A lot of these cards are just not individually strong, right? So if you can force the opponent to not be allowed to do this plan, then there's a chance. And then in the sideboard, there's the Art of Wars, the Lead the Charge, and the Lightning Surges. A lot of these are kind of nods to Prism, which I think Starvo's not gonna be respecting as much. Purely based on two things. So one, the Fi exists in the format. And secondly, that you would kind of need to respect the mirror more. And in the mirror, you kind of went up to the Staunch Responses, the Turn Timbers, which are just these big defensive defense reactions that you can play to basically counter the opponent's strong turns. But yeah, we'll see how this, but I'm pretty sure there's not going to be any Art of War, no Lead the Charge, and no Lightning Surges in the Living Legends format.
You already mentioned a few of the matchups that we could see when playing Starvo at the Battle Hardened in the Living Legend format. But what exactly are the matchups now that we are facing off when playing at the Battle Hardened?
I think there's going to be Chain, for sure. So Duskblade Chain or no Duskblade Chain, just with Rosetta. I don't know exactly, but the Chain guys need to figure that out. There's definitely going to be Fi, this explosive Fi that we saw with, I like to call it Get Naked Fi, which basically throws all its equipment, stubbies, chest piece, head piece, and goes for these powerful 30 plus turns. I think that's going to definitely be a deck day one. People are going to try Prism, of course, because of their love for Prism. I also think at the Battle Hardened, it's going to be a very, let's say, free-for-all, Wild West kind of tournament, because players are not going to have the time, or are not going to want to dedicate the time to testing the Living Legends format for Worlds, because most are going to be focusing on Worlds. So they're just going to bring the deck that they think is the best from day one. However, that being said, of course, so Starvo, Chain, Fi, Prism. I don't know where Icelander fits in all this, but I think it's very difficult for Icelander. Of course, Icelander gets Hypothermia back now, which can do well. So as we know, Icelander historically did well into Briar. However, Chain is not Briar. So I think people need to be aware of this. The fact that you can... What's bad for Chain is that Chain always has, like, let's say, what's good for Chain into Icelander is that Chain will always get extra cards in the banish zone. So unless you're stopping them in critical turns from playing those cards, they can use their hand to absorb the damage that you're dealing and then keep a blue or two and then just play out of the banish zone, which is why Chain is so strong.
Yeah.
So, but maybe Icelander. I don't really see Lexi being a deck. The output is not there. I think. I don't know. I might be wrong. But it's the same. It suffers from the same problem. So all these decks that have LL'd ahead of time, let's say, or the first to LL, they were all doing things that inherently played outside of the attack block 4-card hand, 4-card hand, 4-card hand me, 4-card hand you. Prism did this by playing permanents. Starvo did this by doing Starvo things. Chain did it by banishing. Briar initially did it by not being erratas and having ball lightnings and basically just effectively increasing the value of the cards beyond what is written on the card with channel mods and forces, for example, and or multiple embodiments. I think this is something that people need to be aware of, that Briar is still the errata Briar in Living Legends. So you're not stacking the embodiments. Unless I'm wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to be like this. So that's why I don't think personally that Briar is going to be a contender. This makes a huge difference. But yeah, I think that's the decks I wouldn't be surprised if any of those decks won. I guess if Prism won, I would be a bit more surprised. Either of those decks won. I think so. Chain, Starvo, Fi would be my pick to win the tournament. I also think those are the decks that, let's say, the more veteran players will gravitate towards.
Yeah, it's a lot of nostalgia already, even though the tournament scene isn't that old yet. But it is a nostalgia thing to now pick up those heroes from 1 or 1.5 years ago and being able to play them in a new fashion. Not only like picking up the old deck list and then ready to go, but dive into the new cards, the new card pools, and also think about the new matchups that are available to pick.
Yep, I agree.
You already told us the main lines that you want to look out for when playing Starvo, but can you comprehend in a few sentences what are the main play patterns we want to pull off with Starvo?
So I think basically increase the number of turns where you're show and telling, so to say. So where you're showing Earth, Lightning, Ice, and then pair that up with it doesn't need to be a relevant on hit, right? It's even if the Earth card is just a 7 that is coming in for 9, and then an Ice Hammer that is still a strong turn. In the off turns, reduce the amount of damage you're taking so that you can prolong the game. Those are, let's say, the main lines. What people need to be aware of now is of Awakening. So both when playing with Starvo as well as against Starvo, you need to be aware that you have Awakening in the deck and which card you can Awakening at what life totals. So life total management is something that is relevant. You can afford to take a hit that you don't have to take necessarily. If you can get, for example, the Pulverize in that turn and then completely turn the game. That is also something that people need to be aware of, both in the mirror and against when you're playing against Starvo.
Yeah,
that's kind of, let's say, the gross play pattern that you need to look at when playing the deck.
And when it comes to picking up Starvo and playing him at the Battle Hardened at the World Championship, some of the players might play Starvo for the first time at a tournament. So what are the common mistakes to avoid when picking him up and starting to play Starvo?
Thinking that it doesn't matter what the opponent does. Looking at your hand, getting married to your hand. That's the phrase I would use. So sometimes you need to lay down your hand and then go next hand, let's say. This is one mistake, and the second mistake, mostly I see it in the mirror, where it's taking damage to think you're gonna do damage. And what happens, sometimes you burn your fingers that you take the damage, then you try to come back with something, with a fuse, and then they have the staunch or the turn timber. And then you're basically down whatever life, 5 life, 7 life, etc. And de facto you are at a stalemate where then you need to present another strong attack. And if you don't, then your tempo's gone, but you took the damage. So I think this is something to be aware of. And of course, not maximizing the card. It's also important to keep track of, not hard count your percentages every turn, because that's just not feasible, but be aware of, okay, I just drew 3 lightning cards. That means I have, for example, I played 17 lightning cards. So I had 14 lightning cards. But if I pitched or blocked with 5 lightning cards, how many lightning cards do I still have? And I'm looking for a lightning card, like, it's not that likely, or it's likely or unlikely, or how likely it is to get another card. Or do I just block out this turn, set my red, say go, and then see next turn? So these are kind of like smallish things and like minute, and don't want to get into much detail because it depends on the situation that you're in. But these are things that people need to be aware of. That being said, I'm not here to make Starvo seem like it's a degree in theoretical mathematics. It's not that. Starvo is probably gonna be the easiest deck to play. Like, if you're just picking up a deck in Living Legends format, just pick up Starvo. Like, try to get a good deck list with good ratios, and then just try to follow the basic rule of, I'm gonna try and play as many good attacks as I can, and I'm gonna limit the damage that I'm taking when I'm not doing that.
These were a lot of insights now for players to pick up on when wanting to attend at the Battle Hardened in Barcelona in November. And here at the end of the video, Florin, do you want to shout out anyone?
So many people to shout out. I just want to thank people that I've interacted with, that I've been on testing teams with, that I've gotten to meet a lot. And yeah, that's kind of it.
All right. Florin, thank you so much for giving us your insights on Starvo and taking the time to diving into the basics for the Living Legend format.
Thank you.
To all the viewers, thank you for tuning in today's masterclass. If you found the lesson helpful, leave a like on the video, and if you have further questions, leave them down in the comment section. Also subscribe for future lessons and masterclasses and check out the existing videos on the channel.